Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. You know you are welcome anytime. Hey, everybody. Anytime. Welcome to the 16th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. We're here to grow in our journey together. I'm Milan Starcic, and this is my co-host, Dustin J. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We're two souls on the path of recovery with a desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. So today's topic, we have the importance of a solid steps 1 to 3 for a strong foundation, and the importance of not having reservations in these early steps. Shall we review the steps one by one and then have a little discussion on reservations, Dustin?
Sure, yeah, you bet, Milan. Step one, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. Um, Step two, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step three, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that, and maybe starting with step one, telling the significance of that, and actually, because we're probably going to discuss them as we hit the steps. Why
Mhm.
don't you just explain for people out there what a reservation is?
Okay, so for myself, what a reservation is was a part of the program that I wasn't fully, um, I guess, fully going into with a complete outlook. For me, what reservations were was where my addiction was still hanging in the background. For myself, I can say, when I first come in. I came back in a few years ago, and my powerlessness and letting go, they happened in phases, I guess you could say. So I came in 2021, after I'd hit a bottom at that point, and admitting at that point that I was powerless over my addiction and that my life had become unmanageable wasn't that difficult. And when I started working the program, um, I basically I decided the first time I was going to do it my way. I wasn't fully surrendering. So what a reservation was for me was, for instance, there was parts of it I was picking and choosing. I wasn't fully surrendering to every last part of the program. I was going to quit my DOC but still smoke weed. I was going to, it was okay for me to drink because in my mind drinking wasn't a problem. I wasn't going to buy into the spiritual part or the God part because I wasn't religious. That was the reservations for me. There was just parts of it I wasn't willing to do, and that basically was what a reservation was for myself.
And just even unpacking inside of that, right, is that you were going to be honest, but not
Mhm.
completely honest with yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I-
absolutely. Nobody lied to me more than me. That's basically as
mm,
true as it could be. So,
yep. Oh, I would like to just stop for 1 second to congratulate you, Dustin, on the completion of your first 12 steps.
thank you,
And
Milan.
I would really, I'd like you to let everybody know out here your story on the steps for a minute and the difference it feels to have wholeheartedly pushed through a full set.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been in the program for about 3.5 years. I just recently finished my first set of steps after a relapse back in August. So I'm about 4.5 months, coming up on 5 months time right now for myself. And what I had done is in the past, I was working with my first sponsor, and I had gone through three different sets of steps before, but had never made it past. I think before I made it as far as step six was the furthest that I had ever made it. And then, I would keep relapsing. And I mean, that ties back to those reservations. That is the reason that I kept relapsing. I wasn't working a proper, honest program. It wasn't doing, the most basic parts of the program. Um, so, back in August, I kind of revamped my program. I got a lot more serious. I had had a bad relapse. It scared the living shit out of me. Every time that these relapses were happening, they were getting worse. I was picking up right where I left off, even if I had a year clean time or 8 months clean time. The second that I picked up again, it was as bad, and then it continued to get worse every time. My last using was ended off with me trying to take my life. That was basically how bad my problem was getting, and it scared me quite bad. I've got a family and kids at home. So when I came back, I decided to throw everything at it, and I started working with somebody else, as you know, and I added a lot more people into my recovery. I added a lot more parts of my recovery, and I made a personal goal for myself that in August that I wanted to get through a full set of 12 steps without procrastinating. I wanted to be done them by Christmas. And working together, we've done a weekly session there, going through them, which gave me accountability and timelines to work on. It just kind of kept me on track. And I was able to get really honest with myself going through them this time. Do I think that I've done them 100% completely? Probably not. I'm going to go back through and do more sets of them again. But, I think I probably got 85 to 90% of what I needed to get out that first time, which was just a huge relief. And the real miracle part of it for myself is I've everybody's been encouraging me for a while now to start doing sponsorship myself, and I'll be quite honest, I didn't have that desire. It wasn't that I didn't have the desire to want to help somebody. I didn't feel ready, or I didn't feel secure in that part of it. And the nice part about having done the steps this time and where I've ended up and where it's left me off is that I actually have that desire and that understanding of the 12 steps and how they work to want to start taking on a sponsee now and start passing it on to somebody else. So that's probably been the greatest gift of completing them, is that desire to want to get back and help somebody else. So
And do you feel that you had a spiritual experience
yeah, I believe.
inside doing this round of the steps have changed inside your what feelings of connection or disconnection have changed?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely have more so. When I did the first couple rounds, when I got up to step 5 and 6, I was definitely starting to feel that spiritual connection in there. I'm not going to say that I wasn't getting that part of it. To be quite honest, I think that that spiritual connection that I had gained in the first few attempts at the steps is probably what pulled me through to come back for this time, which was hopefully my last relapse. It was I was starting to get that connection. For me, the part of the spiritual connection is I was a very high strung person. Still am. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's something I work on. I was very much a control freak in every aspect of my life. I would try to control and manipulate everything from the time the sun set each day to what my kids did to what happened at my work to how every interaction that I had with somebody went through the day. And for myself, that spiritual connection and whatnot, the biggest part for me has been just being able to let go, being able to let go and accept that things are going to go the way they are. The outcome might not always be the way that I want, but the peace and calmness that it's giving in my life by, not trying to control every aspect, by trusting that by putting myself in somebody else's hands or somebody else's plan, that's okay, that it's going to work out the way it's going to work out. And it's brought me a lot more calm in my life. And to me, that's where that spiritual connection has come, and it's even given me the ability to be able to sit back and hear other people's problems. I would sit and listen to you before, or my wife, or whoever, but I wouldn't hear a thing you were saying because the marching band was going on in my own head. I might look at you and look like I'm listening to you, but there was a circus going on upstairs. I didn't hear a word you were saying, and now I can actually sit there and have empathy for another human being, and that it's been a big awakening that way for me.
I've heard it said a ton of times, and this is something that, I would say I would 100% believe in my heart is that meetings are the fellowship and the steps are the program.
Yep.
And, for myself, meetings don't keep me clean. Like meetings build my base of knowledge, my base of empathy building, my connections to a newcomer who may need help. or connections to a sponsor if that's where I'm at and what I'm looking for. But my spiritual growth has come from doing my step work and repeatedly attempting to maintain that spiritual condition on a daily basis by performing the steps. And
For
so,
sure.
you know, I feel I feel that it is the true path to liberation through this program. The actions of doing those steps and not just doing them, like not just doing question 1 to 50, but the actual act of, trying to have that tolerance that day, trying to, get rid of that anger and see our part in our lives and gaining acceptance in moments that we just even couldn't have fathomed having that before.
Absolutely. For it, another part that just really rang out when you're saying that was just how my outlook on it all has changed. Like you said, seeing our part in it when you start getting into your step four, when I did an honest set of steps, seeing that pretty much 95% of the interactions that I used to blame for my addiction, poor me, this happened to me, this happened to me, when I really dissected it, it was mostly happening because of me. That was a big
Mm.
eye opener for me. And just I shared a story with you there the other day. I don't mind sharing on here. My wife and I were having a conversation the other day, and she made a comment about, I know that it's not your fault that you have this addiction. And it just rang alarm bells in my head because I sat there for so many years and played the poor me card to her, justifying my addiction, and I had
Mm.
her believing that outlook on it and everything. And that outlook has changed so much for myself now that I just don't see it that way anymore. I don't blame others for my addiction. At the end of the day, I have to be accountable for my own part. It's to sit there and just take the easy way out and the poor me card just really doesn't fly with me anymore at this point. So
Well, I got to say, I'm really, really proud of you, Dustin. And I just thought it, for somebody who was new and, wondering or feeling intimidated by the steps or even just feeling that somehow I'll get to them eventually. I feel that getting to them eventually could be a life or death prospect, and the sooner people wholeheartedly embrace them and start to work this program of action, I believe the sooner your life is going to get better. And would you not agree with that, Dustin? Just for someone who's new out there.
yeah, 100% Milan. And I mean, I'll just reiterate that, in the period of 4.5 months, I buckled down and made myself get a set of steps done. And I truly believe that is the difference between me, stopping, going back out. I needed to get through these steps. I needed to get a set of them underneath me. So, yeah, no, for sure. I would definitely advise somebody that's coming in, if you're at that crisis period, which I think most people are, is, buckle down, and even if they're not the most complete set, just get a set done, like really get through them, do that work, and find that miracle. A person can go back and do as many sets as they want. I find myself throughout the day just even stopping and looking in my book when I'm starting to run into a situation I'm uncomfortable with or that, and I can just quickly do a set of steps in my head in 5 minutes, run through them and see what's going on, and it usually calms the situation right there. So
And that's really kind of, I think, the function of step 10 in the program,
mhm.
is to be doing that constant moral inventory or that daily inventory. So, okay, so we could go back to our topic now. I just, I just kind of thought of that as we were starting. That first of all, it's fresh for you right now.
Yeah.
I wanted to have that conversation before some of the newness of that wore off, and Dustin got his steps done while working full time, while going home and having a busy family life on his only days off. He's not a man of leisure. He fit this into his life. And, what would you say? Maybe you had to work on it half an hour a day or how many hours a week? Or, I think just before we leave, I think that that's an important point to make.
For sure. So kind of what I started doing, Milan, was I'm, as you know, you and I are both early risers. We get up quite early, and I started a routine of more or less getting up every morning. I do my quick gratitude list within a group of men there. I get ready for my day. And the first thing I do before I turn on the news or look at my phone or anything is I pour myself a cup of coffee. I sit down with the step working guidebook, and some days it was one or two questions, some days it was three or four, and I kind of picked away at it like that. Once in a while, if I had a day on a weekend where I had a little bit more time, I might put an hour or two into them. But I basically tried to start my day and then same routine at the end of the day, even if it was only one or two questions, just to keep that momentum going so that I wasn't stopping and going stagnant like I had in the past. I found in the past when I was attempting, and my addiction loved me procrastinating. It loved it when I went off track because, one day turned into three days turned into a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then next thing you know, wasn't doing step work for 2 months, 3 months. And then next thing you know, I was back out using again. So it was, just that consistent, even if it was 5, 10 minutes a day is all that I had. I was just making sure I was doing some of it every day to kind of keep my mindset there.
Well, there you have it. Awesome. Okay, dokie. So you had read the steps when we started here. You had explained what a reservation was. So why do you have any questions you want to ask me right now, or how do you want to
Um,
jump into this?
No, sure, Milan, absolutely. I know your story a little bit there as well too. And I guess I'd ask you, like, you had a different experience than I did going to treatment, rather than me, kind of white knuckling through it on my own while I was working. Did you find it was easier for you to kind of do this without reservations, being that you were in that treatment setting? And I mean, I guess once you came out of treatment back into real life, did you find those reservations trying to creep back in, or what was your experience with that?
So I've said it a ton of times, so anybody out there, tuned into the podcast. But for me, my story is like a 37 years of active addiction, even just from the inceptions of my alcohol to everything else that came after. And the first 20 years, I didn't think there was any problem. So, I had my sponsor actually on the episodes a couple days ago, and I really liked how he broke up, the stages of like
Yeah,
everything's great with a little bit of hiccups, uh, mostly hiccups, little bits of great,
yeah,
all hiccups, and then the devastating downfall.
yeah.
And so, like I didn't really start to consider the hiccups until 20 years into my addiction. And the last 17 years, say from when I was 35 to 52, really was me trying to get back to the good, but mostly hiccups. And so, inside that, I white knuckled it a bunch of times. I modified what I was drinking. I modified one of the, like there's that chapter in the AA book, more on alcoholism. I tried to drink like a gentleman. I tried to only drink beer. Like I did everything I thought possible, which was an exhibit of me trying to control things, right? So, step one is, we admitted we were powerless and our lives had become unmanageable. I couldn't admit that I was powerless until that point where, I went in the hospital and my heart stopped. And, so for me, I woke like gosh, somebody said it quite recently, and I agree. They're like it was like a forced surrender. Like I was beaten at that point. And when I woke up at my friend's daughter's place in Vancouver, there was no fight left in me for the powerlessness. It was just like, okay, I'm done that. What do I got to do now? So uh, I was literally scared to death into the honesty, and my open mindedness was there, and my willing to go forward on something was all there as well. You know, um, so going into treatment, like when they handed me the step work, and it was like step one, I'm like, I'm done this. Like I felt like the questions were almost silly for me at that point because I was literally so far into my own personal surrender I didn't get into the treatment center until 13 days after that event. So I had kind of detoxed myself and lived a life of hell at home because everybody was hating me inside my house for having just been so negligent and careless and deceitful, that it was a highly uncomfortable place to be living.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to talk about step one for you?
Sure. Yeah, you bet. So, same thing I had mentioned. I came in after, a crash and burn. For myself, I guess where step one got tricky, and I mean, it's still something I try to keep in line and keep in check is, like I mentioned, when I came in 2021, I came in after a crash and burn. Thought I had wrecked my life again, pretty bad. Um, one thing about me is I'm a bit of a juggernaut. I can rebuild pretty quick. I am a very driven person. I work very hard. I've come to accept I'm actually addicted to my work as well too. My addiction runs in all forms. I'm addicted to money. I'm addicted to this. I'm addicted to that. So, one of my patterns that I've noticed the last, 3.5 years, even while being in the program, is that I would crash and burn and I'd start doing these step works and I would do a surrender and I would be desperate in those moments, the gift of desperation. But when I get a few months or even a few weeks of time back again and life had kind of calmed down and I'd swept up the mess from the last disaster and I could turn around quick and kind of start rebuilding fast, you know, that powerlessness would drift on me. I would start trying to take my will back pretty quick. Oh, I got this fixed again. This time it'll be different. I'll manage it this way. I'll manage it that way. And to be honest, that's where I stumble and struggle in my program. I have to remember that powerlessness when the times are good, because that's a big problem for me. And it has been. It's been a reoccurring theme. I've been very fortunate. Like by rights, the stuff I've pulled in my life and my career, I don't know how I've been able to keep finding jobs the way I've burnt people. I mean, I was a piece of shit in my active use. I don't like to be so hard on that, but like it was, I would lie, I was deceitful. But I managed to kind of keep coming back again. But you know what? That's been the difference this time is that I really have to accept that, right now I can manage my life in sobriety. But the part I have to really remember is that if I decide to pick up again, that it
Mm.
will become unmanageable that second and it will get worse the next time, and I mean it's not just the simple part. What I've learned this go around is it's not just the simple part of the using, it's the destructive behavior that comes before the using. That's when the unmanageability really starts. And that's been one of the gifts for myself, is being able to spot those patterns and spot it early. And it's I have very early indicators now of when it's starting and I can get a hold of it. So
They call that the prelapsing. Like that's one of
it,
the things that we went over in treatment, and they actually give you like a relapse prevention plan to fill
yeah,
out.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I found for myself, I have a lot of emotional indicators.
Yeah.
Like when I start to do certain things, and a big part of it is when honesty's not present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, powerlessness and unmanageability present. And, one thing I would like to say about that with reservations is that for anybody out there who's new, the desire to still use is a reservation.
Yeah.
And that will sooner or later pull you back out
Hmm.
because you can't truly have the desire to stop using and the desire to use simultaneously.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you either have a little bit of a desire to still use and mostly want to quit, or you have no desire to use and
Yeah.
absolutely want to quit. And it's like, I'm going to say this analogy again, and I've said it before on this podcast, but I just think it's really important. It's like complete defeat means complete defeat. So, when you're thinking about quitting, it's like you can't have a list of terms that your surrender is going to be based on. Like, well, I will quit, but there's a wedding coming up. I'm going to go to that wedding. Oh, I've got a sick parent. I don't know what'll happen when they pass, and for myself, it took a lot of really soul searching to make sure that there was no little squeaks in that bed of surrender for me. And it's important that it is a complete surrender. It's not important for it to necessarily be at the start of it, but you really got to root that stuff out for long term sobriety in any sense, right? And that powerlessness like means that you have no control over it, which means that you can't kind of use ever again.
Yeah.
Like we're addicts, and it's just like now life is going to be different, and that difference is life in recovery. So
Mhm.
embrace it.
Yeah.
Make it the most of what you can from it. Like I find that I personally, and I say it all the time, I got recovery fever burning up here, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
But life is what you make it. You can either be focusing at your recovery or dwelling on the absence of your usage. And, so if you're filling your mind with the thoughts of growth and change that are going to come inside of recovery, then that is what your life will be filled with.
Yeah.
If you're just like, oh, I'm not partying anymore, I don't get to go to that thing. Like that thing didn't do you any good anyway. Otherwise, you wouldn't be crying yourself into an NA room or AA room to begin with, you know?
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. So as you know, I'm up at work right now. I work remotely quite a ways up north away from my family. While I'm up there, I live in a what we call a well site shack in our industry. And I basically kind of come to realize each day when I wake up and I come and sit right here where I am right now, I start my day after my step work looking at my computer and that I have the choice of two different outlooks for that day. I can sit here and I can sit and I can say to myself, boo hoo, I'm away from my family. I'm stuck in this shack. I'm up north where it's 30 below. Life sucks, this, that, blah, 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 blah. Or I can get up and sit in the same seat, look at the same computer, and choose to take the prerogative that, you know what, today's a good day. I have a job. I can provide for my family. This job allows me time to work on my recovery. I'm clean. My family's well taken care of. I have love in my life, things are going well. And from the outside looking in, nobody would be able to tell the difference of those two scenarios except for what I've chosen to do and to look at and those prerogatives that I've chosen to take. And that is the biggest part that I've gained from this recovery is, because like that stinking thinking of, sitting there, the pity party, the feeling sorry for myself, that is the stuff that led me back out the door. And, that's been one of the biggest gifts of this. And it's literally the day is absolutely no different. The only difference is the way that I choose and make that decision in my head how I want to look at that day. So,
There isn't a problem with the world. There's a
nope,
problem with our perception of the world. And
absolutely.
these steps allow us, instead of resenting and acting out on shortcomings on a day-to-day basis, allow us the serenity of acceptance. And that
Hmm.
starts in very little bites.
Yeah,
It does start in very little bites. The concept is there. You can see in the room, but we don't have a key to that door for the first little bit. But then every once in a while, we'll get that feeling. And anybody who's had that feeling, even for a moment, knows that that's a feeling that's really nice to be in. It's
absolutely.
not a feeling of longing. It's not a feeling of pain. It's
Yeah,
a feeling of serenity. And
absolutely.
you can't trade that for the world.
Nope, not something you can buy.
So, okay, I think we just talked about step one pretty good there,
Yeah.
but let's now move to step two.
Okay.
And do you want to maybe just repeat that for the people out there and talk about your understanding of it right now, Dustin?
For sure. So step two and three tie together for me. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And part of the reason when you asked me to think of a topic for this time that I really wanted to select these ones is because when you talk about these first three steps and then reservations in particular, when you're building your foundation, this is one that I know myself I struggled with. And even, in the meetings to this day, I would say when you hear people struggling with the process of NA, probably 50% or better comes to this talk of higher power, a power greater than yourself, or decision to turn over to God. People don't like that God word. They don't like that. They get all hung up on it. And that's a reservation right there. And it's for myself, I'm not a religious person. My family, if anything, was Catholic. When I came into this, I had not been to church in probably 30 something years, unless the last time was when my old grandmother drugged me in there. So, I got really hung up on that part of it as well, too. And, that can be a really big staller for people that are trying to get going in this. And, from my experience of it, I still don't really know what exactly I identify with. Um, I've heard lots of people say God can stand for group of druggies. There's all sorts of different acronyms. You know, some people choose to think that God can be the rooms, it can be the program, it can be nature, it can be this and that. But I think it's important to not get hung up so much on trying to identify what God is. Just roll with it for now, like especially in those early days of that early part of it. For me, it was just something as understanding something bigger than me. Putting myself, humbling myself was a big part of what God was. Me not trying to act as God in my life, me not trying to, control everything and every outcome again. That was a big part of my addiction, was that trying to control every part of it. And for myself, I had lots of little people call them God shots, especially in the early days where, you just kind of you get these feelings when the Jim or the one fellow from our group there always says, "Is it odd or is it God?" When you see these things, like I'll never forget my last big relapse. I was driving and I was shouldn't have been driving obviously, and I was going back into town to go and pick up again, and I was sitting at a set of lights in Red Deer, and I was just a mess. I had been up for days. I hated what I was doing. I was depressed. I knew where I had gotten to again after all this work, but I was powerless against myself at that point. I was on autopilot. I was going to do what I was doing. And I'll never forget it. I used to go to a fellowship in Red Deer, and there was a fellow that hosted the meetings, and I hadn't seen him in probably a year or two. And as I was sitting at that light on my way to go pick up again, here comes this guy riding a pedal bike in the crosswalk right in front of me, and it was that fellow that hosted those meetings. And that to me in that moment, coincidence, whatever you want to call it, I really don't care, but it was what I needed to see. And it was basically, it kind of gave me that hope again. So I mean, there's all those little things, and just that fact of being able to let go and not control everything, just trusting that a higher power can guide you, that if you don't know the answer today, you don't have to know the answer. Just don't try to figure it out yourself and just let it happen. I mean, that's the biggest part of it. But yeah, I really wanted to touch on that because I see so many people struggle and fight this one part of the program that it's just, I think it's something that causes a lot of unnecessary
And there's a few things on that one that I feel are worthy of unpacking.
grief.
First of all, is in other points in the literature, they talk about the most important thing here in the second step is the open-mindedness and the willingness.
Hmm.
Is that you don't have to instantly have a belief in something that you don't even understand. It's a point, it's a crossroad where you go from the threshold of not seeing anything that can help you in the world to being willing to believe. Like, that's why it doesn't say we believe, it says came to believe. And the reason it's came to believe, because that faith turns from this little spark of hope into a faith over time. And it's that willingness and open mindedness that are going to help get you through those moments, you know. And there was the one speaker tape. I'm pretty sure I sent it to you, but either way, it's an old timer, and he said one of the biggest mistakes is that it says God of my understanding in the books, because he was saying he believes it should be God of my experience.
Yeah.
Like, too many people stop at this point and try to figure out the entire universe. You
Mm.
know, like you're never going to have like a Wikipedia photo of God and then full explanation. That's not how, you know, like you don't get to just Google God
Yeah.
or higher power and it comes up and it's one of your own personal thing and you've got every aspect of it defined. Because why? Because it's going to change over time, first of
Hmm.
all. And we're not supposed to understand it. We're just supposed to be willing to believe. And that willingness just allows us that true moment of surrender. Like, where surrender is not putting up a white flag and giving your army over to a prisoner of war camp. Surrender is the incessant mental anguish and repetitive obsessive thoughts you have about your DOC or alcohol or whatever it is that you know that you're continually obsessing over. It is allowing that space of your mind that cycles its thought about the using acquisition and just general obsession to be not your thoughts anymore.
Hmm.
And it is to me almost the greatest Jedi mind trick of the entire program,
Yeah.
because I would have thought to anybody, like, I remember during my 20 months of white knuckling it, I remember days of my brain still cycling over when something was coming up that I had made a reservation for, like where I was like, okay, end of the summer, there's that conference, and I'm going to go off for 5 days to that conference. And I knew it. And it was like, it was all my brain looked forward to for like 5 months,
Yeah.
you know? And but the surrender is really, really, really crucial to your brain being able to move on and focus on recovery. It's like when we said earlier that what you focus on becomes greater. Well,
Hmm.
you know, it's like changing your mind into thinking about recovery instead of thinking about using is really one of the most liberating things you can do for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's really important that these first three steps, when you tie them together and have that understanding of surrender and trusting in a higher power, because when you start getting into your step four and you really start looking at those things, that can dredge up a lot of uncomfortable stuff. So it's important to have that part. I mean, when you sit there, and myself, even when I think of things besides using, just the other addictive behavior that a person had of trying to control every outcome and manipulate it all, just that gift of acceptance that you are where you are, you've done what you've done, and being able to trust in a higher power that it's going to be okay and you're going to move past it. That brief look into sanity, rather than keeping in your own head in the insanity trying to control all those outcomes and things that you can't change, is just, yeah, it's a huge gift and part of this program for sure.
It's really, oh gosh, like I would say it is almost the most joy and serenity bringing part of this
Hmm.
program. You
Yep.
know, I do want to point out there was one thing that's often said, and I 100% agree with, is step one is the one step you have to get perfectly. Everything else is something that, you know, you really do kind of over and over time.
Hmm.
And step one is also done over and over, but it is the one that if you don't do it entirely 100%, if
Yeah.
if your admission of powerlessness is not complete, then you have a reservation. And
Yeah.
that is a dangerous place for an addict to be. having
Hmm.
that, like, because you don't know when that's going to pop out, because life is going to challenge you for the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
know, there will constantly be challenges. And if that reservation is contingent on, you having some power in a moment against your addiction, then it's just it's a false surrender.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can see it between I had a good friend of mine that's passed away now, and he was very against the 12-step program for whatever reason. He was fortunate enough, he'd been to treatment programs lots. And, it was funny when he would get sober, and myself, I was the same way before. You could see when he was, that dry drunk term. He could be sober for a while, but just absolutely miserable in life because nothing else was getting fixed besides the fact of not using. The using didn't just happen for no reason. The using happened because of an insanity going on that we were trying to quiet. So, yeah,
I I went through treatment, and the statistic is, I think it's like 2 to 5% will not relapse within 7 years
yeah,
of leaving treatment. And unfortunately, I've been witness to the flies dropping,
yeah,
and I have had this argument or conversation, not argument really, but conversation with people when they're struggling. And I'm like, what do you have to lose? Like, by just doing all the suggestions. Like, like you're losing everything in life in the relapse, and you're never coming out of that relapse happy. So what do you have to lose by living an hour and like, I would say hour and a half a day. Hour and a half a
mhm,
day, you can have a pretty solid program, man.
yeah, yeah,
Like, and that's including the meetings, really.
yeah,
And to me, it's like freedom from addiction and liberty and less pain in your brain on life on a daily basis. Or you can be back living in your will, hating yourself, getting closer and closer to death every single week. Like,
yeah,
I don't,
absolutely.
I just, like, I agree with every single part of the program? No. But you know what? My way wasn't working.
Yeah.
It truly needed to change whatever was happening in my life. And can I say that I'm experiencing a bunch of ill effects from being in the program? No, I'm not. You
Yeah.
know?
No, that's right. That's right. I think back to, in my active using time, I had I had my sob story so well memorized, my parts of my past that I used to use to justify my behavior and my using I lived in that sorrow and that nightmare and I truly believed in it, right? And it's again, it kind of comes down to that where do you choose you want to live kind of thing? Do you want to live in that past justification, what it was that was justifying you using and acting and living that way? Or do you want to surrender it all, surrender that part of your past? You can't change it. I mean, there's a lot of addicts I think have that same thing. I shouldn't say that. For me, it was, I'm not going to say a lot of addicts, but for me, that was a big part of my using was I loved my sob story. I really did. Poor me, poor me, poor me. Give me another, justify my using another day. It didn't change anything. I mean, you have a choice as you move forward. Do you want to do you want to live back there and live in that sorrow, or you can let go of it and choose to make it a better day today and go on to a new story and have a better thing. And that's one of the gifts I've really found in this, and that comes from even just that surrender and powerlessness. You can't change your past, you can't change those parts of it, so but you do have the choice to let it go and move forward in a different way. So
I didn't even know what a pity party was the first time I started to do the steps. And when I did find out, a pity party is kind of when you sit with someone, commiserate, like, poor me. And it is, first of all, it's a way for you to not take ownership of
yep,
your life. And second of all, it's kind of like an attention seeker, just as
yep,
much as someone's like, oh, look how beautiful I am. Like,
mhm,
pride works in two ways. Like, I'm the best, but also I'm the worst.
yeah,
And I literally realized that I had friends that our entire relationship was based on a commiserating pity party. Like we would call each other to pity and to party in that pity.
Yeah,
You know, and
absolutely.
it's something that when like I'm not coming to your pity parties, Dustin, and if I invite you, don't come to mine because I won't be
Yeah.
there either. You
No,
know.
that's right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of you look at the fellowship part of it. Like, I mean, I have one of those friends that I've known this man for a lot of years, and he's been in active addiction just about his whole life. And the thing I find is the longer I'm going on this path, him and I rarely interact anymore. We don't really have much in common anymore. I'm surrounding myself with people from the program that are like-minded people on the same similar journey because you get to a point where the stories don't mash anymore. They just don't mesh, and for myself anyways, I started finding that those phone calls, as rarely as they were happening, they were no good. They were just dragging me backwards into a place I didn't want to go. So
And that's it. I've heard someone say a lot of times is I try to stay in the middle of the road so I'm not close to falling off the edge.
yeah,
And, keeping yourself inside the recovery area and life, is one sure way that you'll be progressing
yeah,
versus falling backwards. Because backwards is a dangerous place
yeah,
for an addict. You're going to quickly for me, I'm quickly becoming hard on myself if I see myself going backwards, if I see myself displaying old patterns, and quite frankly, just because of my knowledge of doing the work on what prelapse things are for me,
hmm,
then I begin to get scared that I could go backwards, like literally. Like I'm like, whoa, am I on my way to something really nasty and bad here?
yeah. No, absolutely. On like on step three, where they talk about we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I remember when the first, especially early, and even the first few times I went through the steps, and I'm sure that my understanding of this will continue to change. I really struggled with that. Like how do you actually turn over your will? How do you do that? To me, it was a physical action. I was trying to sit there and think like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And I mean, I guess the way that for myself that I started to see this and understand this was, say in a day-to-day thing now, not even necessarily using. If I'm faced with a confrontation at work or something like that, or somebody says something to me that, I don't like, where normally my old patterns would have had me, engaging with that person and trying to one up them or battle with this person, that old stuff. For me, that turning over that will is just as simply as it can be as simple as deciding I don't have to engage, I don't have to go with that, I can just kind of let my higher power ride this one out for me. You don't have to go into every battle, every fight, you don't have to engage all the time with this stuff. Just trusting that you don't have to go into it is a big part. I don't know, what was your experience with that, Milan? Like how was that for you?
I'm really glad you asked that question because it was something I wanted to get into. I was confused as shit when I first went into treatment and I got to this point. And it was fortunate for me that when I first got into treatment, it changed quite rapidly. Like about the first 9 days I was in
Hmm.
treatment. It was only there 35 days, so that it really was a quarter of my time there. But the first 9 days, I believe there was like 6 or 7 of us, and that was it. And so everybody except for one person who from our gratitude group, him and I showed up on the same day. But so there was like 6 people who had been there 4 to 6 weeks, and they were way farther ahead, and they were a hard working bunch of people. Like it was a great example to come in on, but I was totally perplexed, and they said, okay, here's a simple way of thinking about it. And it's stuck with me ever since because it allows me to not get lost in the definition. Just like I was saying with, defining your higher power can stop your recovery versus just experiencing it. So this person said to me, okay, we are coming from, our self-centered, most selfish point probably in our lives from our addiction. And so our choices inside that are going to be for us, not what benefits the group as a whole, or for sure not benefiting others first, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things inside the program for anybody who's new is that you start to try to live by spiritual principles. And I just happen to have a list of them here. I'm just going to read them off for a second.
Sure.
Honesty, acceptance, surrender, hope, commitment, faith, courage, willingness, humility, unconditional love, perseverance, open mindedness, God centeredness, awareness, vigilance, self discipline, sharing and caring, patience, forgiveness, optimism, selflessness, compassion, consideration, kindness, positive thinking, responsibility, tolerance, trust, unity, gratitude, service, and reconciliation. And the list goes on from there. I believe there's like 50 something, right? That you
Yeah.
can easily access on the internet. Anybody who's out there. But this person said to me, when in doubt at any moment, whether you're living in self will or your higher powers will, is to look, and are you living by one of those spiritual principles? Or are you living in the opposite of it, which means that you're breaking a spiritual principle? And so that quickly helped me just for where to put my feet while walking across the tightrope of early recovery, because until I completed my step 4 to 6, I couldn't trust my thoughts. What I thought was an act of generosity was generally a people pleasing or manipulative action on my part. So I think it's really one of the things that I did was a meeting that I went to had a bookmark with 12 spiritual principles, kind of the ones that they would line up with the steps. And so I kept that bookmark in my binder all the time, right on the cover. And so at least I had like 12 guideposts right away. And it, you really got to look at self defensiveness.
Yeah.
You know, like for me, I would justify my anger or my resentment or my intolerance of you by some way that you hurt me first. And it was trapping me inside of unspiritual action. Like it was festering my pity parties. It was like I remember the last year of my addiction and actions, and I was either in a state of anxiety, sadness, or anger for 95% of the time. And that's one thing that where I think Dustin was saying, but don't get trapped in not in taking too much time to do your steps. And one of the things that that I'll repeat that was said to me is that 95% of the problems in your life are from your top 3 defects. You don't need to spend 4 months proving that you have every defect out there to be the defect winner. It's more important that you start giving your life some serenity and some joy and some relief and some self acceptance and some forgiveness. Because if you just want to use your pride in that fashion that we just spoke of being, like the best of the worst, then you're just going to be trapped in your defects. Again, you'll be using a defect to be stuck in your defects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I agree 100%. 90% of what I was dealing with throughout the day, and I still catch myself struggling with this, is my ego. My ego gets a lot of the way, it's when I feel attacked or something like that, that's when that goes on. And I've done the same thing, Milan, like I mentioned to you before. My screensaver on my computer is now spiritual, like the spiritual characteristics there. and spiritual values, and I look at them multiple times a day to just try to be a reminder to react to just about every situation that you can in that way rather than that old way, because my old way certainly was not working. So
Like, you can't go wrong in life being honest with love and acceptance as your, some in each hand. I've got
yeah,
acceptance here, but I'm getting the tattoo of love next here. Give people a
nice.
little
Yeah,
love and
right on.
acceptance.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so I think we've covered the topics pretty good here. What do you think,
Yeah, I think
Dustin?
so. Yeah, no, I think so, Milan. Yeah, I
I
that's
want to say that I first of all want to thank you for coming on your second episode here. This is a Saturday breakfast brunch with Dustin J and Milan.
yeah.
I would like to also congratulate you again on all your hard work inside the program. I'm so proud of you, and watching your ability to change how you react from doing the steps has been one of my greatest joys over the last 4.5 months, brother.
Well, I
I,
appreciate your help in that too, Milan. Thank you very much.
and these. So Dustin and I, we're going to embark. We're probably going to do like 1 to 3 per week, but we're gonna come on and we're gonna discuss we're gonna do a series on spiritual principles coming up here, everybody. So
Mhm.
stay tuned to some pretty cool recovery fun coming up here for us, because I think that for myself, it was really something that I needed to learn here, inside the program, and hopefully Dustin and I can just shed some light on how we've tackled implementing these principles in our lives, and how we've struggled to get some of their opposites out of our lives.
Mhm. For sure.
Okay, if you've liked what you've seen here, please subscribe and share and like this podcast. Help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience, so please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We would love to hear from you. We're hoping to create slideshows of the Freedom Rising in your lives, so please send any photos of you flourishing in your life as a result of your recovery. Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Catch you later, everybody. I love
See
you
you, Milan.
tons.